Hi, everyone. My name is Hayla Alawi, and on behalf of Atmosphere Press, I am so pleased to welcome you to today's live author reading of fiction for kids. We'll be hearing from Rebecca Himmel Glassman, reading from Welcome to the Enchanted Forest, released on February 22nd, Jane Calame, reading from Our Earth, released August 22nd, and George J. Linsenmeyer, reading from Sherri the Shrimp Saves the Day, released on September 24th. All three authors' books can be purchased from online retailers and from select bookstores. And of course, the books can be ordered on Atmosphere Press's website. That's at atmospherepress.com/books. And I'm also going to put some links in the chat for everybody so that you can check out each book individually. So at the end of our event today, we are going to have time for audience questions. So during the readings, if you have a question for one or more of our authors, go ahead and type those in the chat and I'll make sure they get asked. We do ask that you stay muted for the duration of the event, but you can also feel free to use the chat for any praise and comments. And one last note is that we at Atmosphere Press appreciate your support today and always. If you have a manuscript of your own, we would love to read it, so submit your work today to books@atmospherepress.com. Again, thank you so much for tuning in and supporting Rebecca, Jane, and George today. We're going to start off with our first reader, who is Rebecca Glassman. Rebecca is new to the publishing world, even though she has been writing since childhood. After honing her legal writing skills while working as a paralegal for well over 20 years, she decided it was time to tap into her creative side. Married and a mother of three, Rebecca decided it was time to take her writing to the next level, and almost 14 years ago, she began her middle grade fantasy fiction series, Welcome to the Enchanted Forest. She completed 4 books, but unfortunately, because life got in the way, as it often does, the books were put aside temporarily. Now, 14 years later, Rebecca has decided the time has come for her to share her stories with the world. She loves to relax with family, especially her 3 young granddaughters, and she also enjoys singing and recording. In Welcome to the Enchanted Forest, Rose and her sisters are 4 girls growing up in a trailer park with no father and a hardworking but absent mother. 11-year-old Drew is lonely and awkward with no friends and parents who are always too busy. One day, a mysterious dog suddenly appears and lures the girls into the forest, while an old stuffed dog jumps off a shelf and convinces Drew to do the same. And then the fun begins. So now let's welcome Rebecca to hear more of the story.
Okay, I'm going to start with the prologue just to give you a sense of the forest, and then I'll read a little bit about my main characters. The sun was beginning to set as evening was approaching, casting long shadows through the tall trees in the enchanted forest. There were splashes of blues, yellows, and reds in the sky as the birds flew by singing their soft melody. Butterflies were flitting from one flower to the next. All of the forest animals were gathered in a clearing, eagerly waiting. Skip and Sparky had called a meeting in anticipation of the new guests who were about to arrive. Magic was all around in the twinkle of the lights coming from the fireflies and colors mysteriously appearing, shooting up and rising above the forest into the night sky. All of the forest animals were excited as they waited to hear Skip speak. "Gather around, everyone," Skip said in his warm voice, his black eyes twinkling as darkness was starting to settle in. Skip hopped from one foot to another as he spoke. The large rabbit could never stand still even a moment, especially when he was excited, and he was always excited when preparing for the arrival of new guests. The animals stood together waiting. No one spoke. Skip looked at all of the forest creatures, each unique in their own way. There was Birdie, the tall bird with her beautiful, colorful feathers and bright, smiling eyes. She was a nonstop chatterbox, but as annoying as that could be, everyone loved her for her warmth and kindness. Then there was Honey Bear with her large, floppy hat and brightly colored dress. She was so maternal. Oh, and Lady, short for Ladybug, who had difficulty standing up straight, her shell too heavy for her tiny body, even as she tried to pay attention to what Skip was saying. There were many more, of course, each with their own special style and all here to help the children, their guests. Every animal had his or her own assignment. Not all of the animals were available to help with each of the guests. Only Skip and Sparky had that privilege. Sparky, an unusually tall brown squirrel, was busy nibbling on his acorn as Skip spoke to the animals. Skip was in charge of the forest and its inhabitants, making sure that everything was done right. Sensitivity was key when dealing with the children, and Skip was an expert in making sure everyone knew it. The tall rabbit was as kind as he was smart. Sparky was his sidekick. He had been with Skip through thick and thin. Sparky wasn't as savvy as Skip, but his warmth and kindness more than made up for it. Sparky was standing outside the circle of animals, taking in all of their eager faces as Skip assigned tasks to each of them. It was going to be a busy week, but that was okay. They would be helping the children. What an incredible reason to be here. This magical forest only lived in the minds of the children they helped. For the adults, the enchanted forest was just a forest like any other. No more, no less. Skip was done speaking, and the animals dispersed for the night to their own places, excited and eagerly waiting for tomorrow. Sparky walked over to Skip. Are you looking forward to greeting our new guests? What do you think? Skip asked, smiling. I think we may have our hands full, Sparky said. Maybe, Skip said, but I think we will be able to help these children. I look forward to that, and especially to seeing that they are able to get back to their lives happier than when they arrived. Sparky looked up and noted that evening had finally arrived, and the only light came from the twinkling stars up above the trees of the forest. He looked at Skip and said, Until tomorrow, then. Skip just nodded as he watched Sparky walk into the darkness and disappear. Rose felt a presence. She looked up and found herself face to face with a little dog who was happily wagging its tail and looking right into her eyes. The dog was adorable, with shaggy long white hair and apricot-colored ears. The hair down the middle of its back was the same color as its ears. The dog's tail was long and white and fluffy. Momentarily forgetting her anger, Rose called her sisters. Sarah, Nikki, Mandy, come out here. What now, Rose? We're supposed to be having dinner, Sarah yelled through the open trailer door. Come on, Rose called out. The three girls came running out of the trailer, tripping over each other in their rush to see what had gotten Rose so excited. They stopped suddenly when they saw their baby sister sitting on the ground cuddling a little dog. The dog was lying in Rose's arms and licking her. Rose looked so happy, and she was. The dog was so soft and cuddly. Rose put her nose into the dog's fur and was surprised to find that she had a woodsy smell, as though she had been around grass and trees. The three sisters gathered around Rose in an attempt to get a better look at the dog. Meet Susie, Rose said excitedly. How do you know her name? Mandy asked. Well, she has a pretty pink collar with her name spelled out in sparkly crystals. See? S-U-Z-I. Look at her. Isn't she adorable? Rose asked. If she has a collar, doesn't that mean that she belongs to someone? Maybe she's lost, Nikki chimed in. Where'd she come from? Mandy asked. I don't know. She just showed up, and I want to keep her, Rose responded. You can't keep a dog that belongs to someone else, Sarah said. Besides, if you keep her, Mom's going to kill you. The last thing she needs is another mouth to feed. Rose was starting to lose it again. Why did Sarah always have to spoil all of the fun? It's not as if Rose had decided to go out and buy a dog. Susie just showed up, and she was so cute. Why couldn't they keep her? Sarah was such a pain. She always acted like she was in charge, and everyone had to listen to her. Well, Rose wasn't going to listen. Mom didn't have to know about the dog. How would she find out? Sarah didn't have to tell her, and the dog could probably take care of herself. She must have been wandering around for a while. She didn't have any kind of tag on her that said who she belonged to or where she came from. She just magically appeared when Rose was feeling lousy. Susie could be left outside and fed once a day. That would work. Sarah, if the dog stays outside tonight and is still here in the morning, we can figure out what to do then. Please, Sarah, you don't have to tell Mom. Please, Rose was begging. Fine, we'll leave this alone until tomorrow and deal with it then. For now, I won't say anything to Mom. Let's just eat supper. Nikki, Mandy, come on. Sarah, I'm not really hungry, Nikki said. Me neither, Mandy added. You've got to be kidding, Sarah said angrily. This is all your fault. Sarah pointed at Rose. Rose just shrugged her shoulders. At this point, she didn't care what her grumpy older sister thought. Can I hold her? Nikki asked. Rose gave the little dog to her sister. She watched as Nikki took Susie and cuddled her in her arms as though she were a small baby. Then Mandy took a turn. None of the girls wanted to let the dog go. There was no doubt that they were hoping that the following day they would find Susie sitting outside the trailer waiting for them. Tick tock, tick tock. The pendulum on the old grandfather clock swung back and forth as the minutes slowly ticked by. Drew and his parents were eating dinner. Time passed and no one spoke. The only sound that could be heard was the clicking of the forks against china. Drew was staring down at his phone. He had attempted a conversation a few minutes ago, but Mom and Dad had brushed him off. They were on their phones, probably busy with work. Mom was an advertising executive who video conferenced all day long, whether she was at home or in her office in the city. Dad was a lawyer who was always in court or with clients in meetings. It seemed like they never stopped working, and now they were at the dinner table, where they continued to work. Drew would have preferred to talk to his parents about school, his friend Jake, or anything else that mattered to him. But Mom and Dad never had any time for him. When they shut Drew down, he didn't say a word. He just kept his feelings to himself. He didn't care anymore. When he was done with his meal, he left the table. He wondered if his parents even noticed. Drew climbed the stairs to his bedroom and sat down at the window, looking out at the colors of the setting sun. He did not turn on the light as the evening shadows started to fill the room. Drew became focused on the backyard. There was a fence, and behind the fence was the forest. He always wondered about the forest. It was really dark, and from this distance, you couldn't even see the trees. Every morning, Drew would look out his bedroom window, past the fence, and even though the sun was shining, all he could see was darkness. Not trees with their green leaves and multiple branches, not the birds who might be singing, nothing, just utter blackness. But that never scared him, and one day Drew wanted to go into the forest and get lost there. No one would miss him, certainly not his parents, who were too busy with their work, and certainly not any of the kids at school, who ignored him altogether. Drew turned his head away from the window and glanced up at his shelf where his old stuffed dog Charlie sat. Charlie had been his longtime companion when he was much younger, but now Drew felt that he had outgrown the ratty-looking toy. He wondered why Mom was so insistent on keeping the dog in his room. Several times, Drew had attempted to give the dog to one of the neighbor's kids, but Mom always found out and took the stuffed toy back. He had no idea why she did that, but she always did. He thought it was really strange, but he decided not to ask her about it. The sisters arrived at the residential part of town. There were trees lining the streets and growing in front of each of the lovely homes that were side by side. All the homes had lawns with shrubs lining the front, and there were flower beds filled with colorful blooms planted in front of the shrubs. The girls had never been here before and slowed as they looked around, taking everything in. "Come on, let's start putting up those signs," Sarah ordered. The girls separated and began to tack their signs to a few trees on each block. There were about 20 blocks of homes, and soon the sisters began to tire. Susie kept pace with the girls, but mostly she walked next to Rose, and every time Rose was hanging a sign, Susie would jump on her and pull at her pants. "Stop it, Susie, you're annoying me. Go bother one of the others." Susie stopped for a moment and looked up at Rose, making her smile. Then she started all over again, yanking and pulling at the hem of Rose's pants. "What do you want from me?" Susie was hanging on to Rose's pants when Rose tried to shake her off. The girl shook her legs so hard that suddenly the dog went flying into the air. She landed on the hard pavement, got up, and started to run. "Susie, where are you going? I'm sorry, come back," Rose called after the dog. But Susie didn't stop. She just ran, and Rose was having a hard time keeping up with her. "Sarah, Mandy, Nikki, help me catch Susie. She's running away," Rose screamed. The girls started chasing after the little dog. When it seemed like they were catching up, Susie ran even faster. They continued their mad chase, running past all of the houses and across streets. Several cars stopped short in an attempt to avoid hitting the girls and the dog. Angry drivers got out of their cars, screaming at Rose as she jumped out in front of them. She barely heard them as she was trying to catch up with Susie. Her sisters, meanwhile, were struggling to keep up with Rose and the dog. Susie led them on a wild chase. Suddenly, the little dog stopped. The girls stopped too. They were standing at the entrance of the forest. As far as the eye could see, everything looked black. The sisters couldn't even see any trees. It was too scary and no one was going in. There were lots of stories about the forest. Some of the locals said it was magical. They claimed to have seen bright lights in a rainbow of colors shining up to the sky at night when they looked out their windows. Then the other day, Jack said that his uncle decided to go into the forest and see what the big deal was. He didn't believe any of the stories. Jack's uncle was a big guy and wasn't afraid of anything. So, if anyone could get to the bottom of what was happening, he could. Well, he went into the forest and came running out a few minutes later. According to him, it was pitch dark. He could barely see his own hands in front of him. And this was during the day. He also said he heard howling and other animal noises like barking and growling, and he even thought he heard someone crying. Well, he wasn't waiting to see where the sounds were coming from. He just hightailed it out of there as fast as he could. Afterwards, no one ever ventured into the forest again. When the girls caught up with her, Susie was panting hard. Not a moment passed, however, before she began to run again, and she headed straight into the forest. In a flash, Rose, seeing her opportunity to escape, took off after the dog. She didn't even think about how scary the forest might be. She just ran.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. And I mean, you're kind of leaving us on a cliffhanger there, but I love it. Thank you for that reading.
That was the point.
Received perfectly. Well, at this time, now reading next is Jane, who is a childcare professional with almost 20 years experience in the field. She's presently working as a pre-kindergarten teacher in her native city of San Francisco. The daughter of two environmentalists, sustainability and the natural world have been her passions from an early age. As an educator, she hopes to teach and inspire future generations to live with an eco-conscious mindset as well. In her free time, Jane enjoys gardening, hiking, biking, taking the bus to museums, lounging around with her two cats, drinking tea, and playing Scrabble with her family. You can learn more at sageadviceearth.com. Today, we'll be hearing Jane read from Our Earth, which is an upbeat, rhyming guide to sustainability for little ones. From water conservation to recycling, this book offers up healthy lifestyle habits on how to help preserve our planet. Not only can kids learn how to live in a way that is more eco-friendly, they can have fun doing it. And while Jane is reading, I'll actually be screen sharing the illustrations from the book. So I'll pull this up, and then once that's set, Jane will begin her reading.
All right, thank you so much.
All right, let's see. So I'm screen sharing. Oh, of course, all the buttons moved around.
I can fill our time, just introduce the book a little more. This is a little more for the younger set than Rebecca's. I think so, more for like ages 3 through 8 than just young adults, I guess maybe, or a little older. So yeah, just for the age group to get an idea of where we're going to now, shifting gears a little bit.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, I'm just enabling the screen share now, so I
Okay.
should be able to do this in just a second. All right, here we go. So I'm pulling it up here. Okay, is it appearing in full screen now?
Yes, it is.
All right, go right ahead, Jane.
All right. So this book is dedicated to my family, friends, the current children of the world, and the future generations yet to grace us with their presence. May you all find health, happiness, and harmony in this life. So you've been born. Welcome. Hooray. The people are glad you made it to Earth today. There are cities and towns and some places wild. You may live in any of these, little mystical child. But no matter where you live, some things must be done to care for this planet as we have only one. You'll grow, you'll learn, and live on this planet. So here are some tips to help you befriend and protect it. Do your best to save water, our most precious resource. How? When not in use, turn off the faucet, of course. Feel a chill at home? Forget the thermostat. Layering on a sweater will take care of that. And when leaving a room, remember to turn off the light. If you're not there in it, it need not be bright. Compost, recycle, use only what you need. Keeping our waste minimal helps the planet succeed. Walk, bicycle, taking public transportation is key. It helps lower the carbon footprint of you and me. If you have access to a garden, plant lots of flowers and trees. Sow seeds that are good for the soil and seeds that are good for the bees. Bees pollinate flowers, giving us fruits and veggies. Good for your eyesight and building strong bodies, helping you grow, thrive, succeed. Taking care of our planet is a delicate art, but everyone is a hero when doing their part. Because without the art of participation, our Earth is just A. So go out there, little one, and save the day.
Right. Thank you so much, Jane. That
Thank
was a
you.
wonderful reading. I always just love that fruits and veggies page. So I wanted to hover there a little bit, but that was beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, yeah, of course. So now, reading at this point, we have another children's book. Our final reader for today is George J. Linsenmeyer. George lives in Huntington, almost heaven, West Virginia, with his lovely wife, Paula. They have four wonderful sons and two grandchildren. He is a practicing cardiologist and is an associate professor at the Joan C. Edwards School of Medicine at Marshall University in Huntington, West Virginia. His specialty is focused on the diagnosis and prevention of heart disease. Education and literacy are important factors for staying healthy, so also his hobbies include golf, snow skiing, and having fun with his wonderful family. Today we'll be hearing George read from Sherri the Shrimp Saves the Day, in which Octavius the octopus has gone missing. Where could he be? When Octavius is found trapped in a cage at the bottom of the ocean, his friends are all determined to get him out. But his rescue turns out to be a difficult task until Sherri the shrimp shows up. So, just again, with this book, I'll be screen sharing the illustrations. So, I'm going to go ahead and pull those up now. And so, this book is dedicated to George's wonderful family, including his two grandchildren, Magnolia and Christian. Once upon a time, it was a beautiful day down in the deep blue sea. Larry the lobster went to visit his good friend, Kevin the crab. Hello, Kevin. How are you today? Not so good as usual. It's been a real bad day. I cannot find Octavius the octopus anywhere. Larry said, well, maybe he went to see Farah the flounder. I think he's sweet on her. He visits her almost every day. So Larry the lobster and Kevin the crab set out to find their friend. They walked through the beautiful coral garden and past the long row of hermit crabs. They were in a big hurry and did not have much time to socialize. Octavius was nowhere to be found. Farah the flounder was becoming very worried. No one had seen Octavius the octopus in several days. Soon the whole sea was in full alert. All the fish and all the whales were looking and looking, but Octavius was nowhere to be found. All of a sudden, Steve the swordfish came swimming and swimming. Come quickly, I have found Octavius the octopus, and hurry we must. They swiftly swam to the spot where he was found. They gasped in surprise to see their friend trapped in a cage. The lock on the cage was as strong as you will find. They all exclaimed at once, whatever will we do? Octavius announced with glee, my friends, at last I knew you would come to my rescue. I have struggled for days, but these bars will not yield. Please help me. Steve the swordfish rose to the challenge. Stand back, he said. I shall saw these bars with my sharp sword. He sawed and sawed for hours, but the bars on the cage would not falter. Larry the lobster was proud of his claws and his strength of his paws. Stand back, he shouted. I shall free our good friend. He clawed and clawed, but all in great vain. The bars were unrelenting. Kevin the crab was getting madder than mad. Enough of this commotion. Let me get you back to the ocean. He squeezed and squeezed his powerful pincers, but the thick bars would not splinter. Who did this devilish deed? Farah the flounder was crying and crying. You must save Octavius. He's our best friend. We cannot do without the octopus in our garden. Sam the seahorse was prancing and dancing, 'cause the son of Sea Biscuit was anxious to fix it. I shall race like the wind, and help I shall bring. Keep your eye on the prize, and our friend shall be free. Hours had passed, and hope seemed to fade. All of a sudden, they saw Sam the seahorse at full bore gallop, and Sherri the shrimp was on top of the saddle. Sherri the shrimp was the smallest of friends, but smart she was and level of head. She swam through the keyhole of the lock and twisted the tumblers like a clock. The lock flew open in a jiffy. Sherri the shrimp was really quite nifty. Octavius the octopus was finally free like the wind. That night the celebration was as big as a blue-colored whale. The party was fabulous with plenty of treats. Octavius the octopus cooked for his friends, flipping the burgers 8 at a time. Sherri the shrimp was small in size, but when it came to saving her friend, she was clever and wise. And that was the day that Sherri the shrimp saved the day with the help of all her friends. The end. I'm sorry there were technical difficulties, but I hope that reading sufficed still. And thank you to George for writing such a wonderful tale of all those friends led by Sherri the Shrimp in the end. So at this time, we do have time for our audience Q&A. So if you have a question for one or more of our authors, please go ahead and type those in the chat and I'll make sure they get asked. We have already received a question for all 3 authors. This question is, what is the main message you hope children and their families can take away from your story? George, I'm thinking if your audio is still not coming through, you can put your response in the chat for everyone to see. And in the meantime, I think it would be good to go in reading order. So Rebecca, do you want to start us off with this one about the message that you hope children and the families reading with them will take away from Welcome to the Enchanted Forest?
Sure. Truth of the matter is, when I wrote the books, I mean, I only published one. I intend to publish more. But when I had written the books, in my mind, it was always children struggle with a lot of different things that to some adults, they may seem important, to others not, but to children, they're important. And kids need to have an outlet. They need to have someone there for them. In my books, the Enchanted Forest is really the mentor or the friend or the parent that you can't speak to. That's who they are for these children. So the kids go into the forest dealing with stuff. Rose and her 4 sisters are growing up in a trailer park. They range in age from 9 to 12. The 12-year-old has taken on the mom role. There is a mom in the picture, but she's busy working 24/7. So the kids have to fend for themselves, basically. In the forest, they learn how to cope with a lot of stuff, and they learn to see that things may not be as bad as it seems. With Drew, he's quirky, he's alone, he's got no friends. He made one friend, but the rest of his peers think he's weird. His parents are 2 professionals that are busy, busy, busy and never have time for him. And that's very frustrating, especially for a child who's alone in school, alone at home. So going into the forest, he starts to learn how to cope with those issues. So pretty much the message is that things can always be better. You can learn to cope, and that's really what my message is. Just as a hint, the next book, which is going to be about children who grow up very wealthy, but their family economy flips on its ear, and they have to deal with that, which is very hard. A lot of people don't realize that, oh, so they don't have money, not a big deal. It is a big deal when you're young, and these kids are 11 years old when you're young, and that's all you're used to. So that's my next book. It includes music, and it includes the animals in the forest and all of that. But when that comes out, I'll do another reading. That's all.
Fantastic. But no, I think you're totally right. I think some of the most impactful fiction, especially middle grade fiction, is the types of stories that take children seriously and the things that they go through at, any age. So I think that's a really great thing to hear is that you're really um, engaging with that and kind of giving a voice to that. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Um, yeah, of course. Jane, I know this was mentioned a little bit in your author bio already, but I'd love to hear you talk a little bit more about the main message you hope children and their families can take away from your story.
I really hope to empower families and empower children when they're taking accountability and responsibility for these kind of big issues that will be, handed down to them when they are adults. So, how can we kind of build the mindset towards sustainability now so they know the simple things to do? And if they're already working and doing the simple things that we know are sustainable habits and will help kind of fight climate change, who's to say that they're not going to then brainstorm some other idea? They've got wind machines that like suck pollution out of the air now. We're housing methane gas now. So who's to say that this generation growing up isn't going to have even better forward-thinking ideas for sustainability and maintaining the health of the planet? So, I mean, if we can get them, really little, just putting their compost into the compost bin, making sure that paper goes in the recycling, awesome, and who's to say where it will go from there? Because I remember learning about this when I was in third grade and hearing about recycling and, the Amazon and what was happening to the rainforests and being really upset and wanting to know what I could do as an individual. So I think that these are issues that the children are learning about from younger and younger years. So really building that empowerment and accountability and responsibility into the daily habit.
Yeah, now that you mentioned that, I'm remembering how I first, started getting introduced to that at a very similar age. And it's so true, the solutions could be in the young generation that we're teaching and raising now, or I should say further solutions.
Further
So
solutions, yeah.
yeah, yeah. So this is, I think that's a great, way to empower that in children now. I also want to mention George's response to the question. He says that we all have different talents and gifts to give to other people. Being different is not inferior. And I think that's really just, it's a wonderful thing to be able to showcase and to understand. Um, so this next question, this is for Rebecca. What was the final factor that led you to finally publish your stories? And thank you for doing so.
You're welcome to whoever posed that question. Um, I had, as you read off my bio, I had written these stories about 14, it's a little longer now, but about 14, 15 years ago. And I just wrote them one after the other. And truthfully, life did get in the way. But what ended up happening is about maybe a year before I published, somebody was talking about publishing their books. And I thought to myself, you know what? I've got 4 books sitting in my computer taking up space. Maybe it would be a good idea to reread what I wrote and to edit it and do something with it. This book one is actually a combination of 2 books. My original book one and my original book two. One of your editors was awesome because she read both books. I gave her one of the books to read and I said, I just want you to know where I'm going with this series. So let me send you the other one. Just read it. You don't have to do anything with it because we're just working on one of the books. And she said to me in a one sentence email, put them together. And I said to her, what? They're two different stories. She said, no, put them together. You could do it. I said, okay. And I thought to myself, I'm going to shoot her. How am I supposed to put the two different stories? But I managed to, she made me work my brain, and I managed to combine the two stories and have them overlap each other. Anybody that reads the book will see that. Um, and what I liked about her idea was that you have kids who come from uh, poverty, which is not shameful or anything like that, but just in contrast to a boy who comes from a more of an upper middle class family. And yet they have problems, just like any other kid. So when I put it together, when we were working on it, and even now reading it, I'm thinking to myself, wow, that sounds really good. Did I actually write it? But I was excited to do it. I wanted to see my name in print. I wanted to see a book with a cover on it. And I just felt it was time. You know, my kids, my daughter is married with kids of her own, so she's out of the house. My son is doing his thing. And now it's not that I'm free, I'm still busy, but now was like the perfect time to publish. And that's why I did it now as opposed to, and when I think about all the editing that it went through, I'm a better writer today than I was then. So it worked out, thankfully.
Yeah, that's all fantastic to hear about. I'm so glad that, you know, the 14 years didn't go on any longer and we did get to receive this story into the world. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
That's really wonderful.
Thank you.
This next question, this is for Jane and George. Did you already know your illustrator when you wrote your story? Or if not, what was the process of selecting an illustrator and working with them? So George, if the mic is still not working, definitely feel free to use the chat. And then Jane, maybe start us off with this one.
Sure. No, I didn't have an illustrator. I had talked to some artist friends of mine, way, way back in the day before it, and then shelved the book. Yeah, so I talked to some artist friends of mine. They were kind of interested, and nothing ever happened about it. So I put the book on a shelf. Then one day I was at work and just decided, what should I do with my book too? And started throwing spaghetti against the wall. And I hit Atmosphere Press, and, or they were one of the ones that got back to me and the best one that I liked. So, yeah. And then from there, they gave me some illustrator options because I was looking for an illustrator. I had done the illustrations myself, but I wanted them redrawn to a better caliber by a professional. Um, so yeah, they gave me a few options. I saw some portfolios. I found the one that I felt blended best with my style that I was already creating myself. And from there, we linked up and I did a contract with her. And she and I worked together. She's actually based in London. She's from Sardinia, Daniela Frangia. Should mention her name, highly important. Yeah, she's worked with Nickelodeon. She's worked with a bunch of other big illustrators. So her portfolio kind of blew me away, and I was just really excited to be able to work with her, and also have the option of being able to work with so many other talented illustrators as well. So Atmosphere really came through on that one, and yeah, it was exciting to partner with her.
Yeah, I love to hear the process because it's a little bit different for every author of working with an illustrator and going through that selection process. And then once you have selected them, it's a whole new ball game. So I'm always excited to hear about that. It sounds like it was really quite a fruitful partnership. So I'm happy to hear that.
It
Um,
was.
yeah, perfect. We have one more question. This is for all three authors. What are you planning to write next? Rebecca, I know you've already mentioned this a little bit, so maybe give us a sneak peek into your next project.
Okay, so as I alluded to before, the next book will be book 2 of this series. Does end up in the Enchanted Forest. We have a different a different animal that brings the kids to the forest. And it's kids whose the parents were very wealthy. They lived in a very, very well-to-do community with servants, and they went to private school. They went to a private music school, and they all of a sudden, the business that the father was engaged in just fell flat. The economy, the whole thing, and they ended up moving to an apartment that was a little way away from the forest. The apartment actually in that book is my in-laws' apartment in Brooklyn, New York. I had that visual because it was a very small apartment compared to the massive home. But it's the kids not being able to deal in school. They were being bullied, they were being harassed. Everybody knew they were rich, and all of a sudden they weren't. But again, it's about perspective also. Rich to one can be poor to another. And, these kids learn perspective, and they learn how to understand that while they're moving from such wealth, they still have a roof over their head. They still have two loving parents. And they're twins. They have two loving parents who would do anything for them. And there's food in their belly. They're not poor like the sisters in my present book. So that's pretty much where that's going. I'm still in the middle of rewriting it, and I'm adding pieces to it. And I find that this one's going to be longer than the original. This would technically be my original book 3. This one's going to be definitely longer than my original book 3 because I am adding parts to it. And yeah, there's a lot of focus on music. I wouldn't call myself a musician because I'm not a professional musician, but I sing, I play the piano. So I put a lot of me goes into these books. So I put a lot of that into the book. But I'm very excited, and I can't wait to finish it because I want to go to the next one. But I'm just very excited about it. So that's my next project. I have a bunch of short stories that I've written. They're on my website, but they need editing as well. Ultimately, I would compile all of them and create one anthology of my short stories. But that's for another. Right now, I'm focusing on book 2.
Yeah, so lots of exciting updates on the horizon, it sounds like. So
Yeah.
we'll be excited to be on the lookout for those. Um, I did want to draw attention to the chat for George's response to the last question about working with an illustrator. He says, it's a long story, but my sons were very hyperactive and I used to tell them stories. One story I wrote down, which sat in a file for 25 years. Then, when my first grandchild was born, I revised the story, and my sister-in-law had one of her relatives, her husband's niece, do the illustration and present the copy to me on my birthday. Eventually, I got connected to Atmosphere Press, and one thing led to another, which that is like the most amazing birthday present I can think of. That is so beautiful. So I think that's just such a wonderful experience to be able to hear about. And a sequel to this book that we heard from today is in the process with Atmosphere, so you can all be on the lookout for that as well. So then, Jane, let us know for you, what are you planning to write next?
I have written a little book as well, another for the young preschool age kids called Little Sprout. It's basically a kind of who, what, when, where, why about where plants grow and kind of connecting how plants grow to how people grow. So, I will be will be having to find an illustrator that can really bring the illustrations to life because I think it might be more of a picture story with kind of the words being like the suggestions and like the illustrations really bringing the ideas to life, you know? So we'll see where that goes. And that kind of chimes into the question in the chat, actually. if you don't mind, I'll just go. The
Yeah.
process of working with the illustrator was about 6 months, I say, back and forth on the book. Just sketching out ideas or giving her the illustrations that I already had done, and then illustrations that I didn't have done, just giving those rough sketches, tweaking those sketches, sending them back to me via email, giving her comments back, and just kind of working till we kind of flowed everything out was about 6 months. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, it's such a collaboration, such a partnership. So it's
Mhm.
I imagine, you want to make sure you get it right. So that makes total sense. And I'm also excited to hear about new developments on the horizon from all three of you. I think this is really going to be such great additions to the literary landscape. So, but at this time, I want to say thank you so much to Rachel, Jane, or Rachel, sorry, Rebecca, Jane,
You know,
and
a lot of
George.
people do that. A lot of people call me Rachel instead of Rebecca. I don't know why. That doesn't
Really?
sound the same, but
Yeah, I don't know. It's something subconscious. Um, but Rebecca, Jane, and George for being generous today with your time, your words, and your books, and sharing these with us today, and the illustrations as well. Thank you to everyone in the audience for joining us as well and celebrating these authors together. Don't forget, of course, that you can order Welcome to the Enchanted Forest, Our Earth, and Sherri the Shrimp Saves the Day from the chat links that I just put in there one more time. So, all three of those links to the books. And please also consider checking out atmospherepress.com to browse our new and forthcoming releases, sign up for our email newsletter, or submit a book manuscript of your own. You can submit your work to books@atmospherepress.com and let us know that you attended today's event. We'll look forward to hearing from you, but until then, that's it. So have a great upcoming week and Thanksgiving, everyone.
you too.
Bye.